seems like it was just a year or two ago I was getting really serious about this and running my first Cusco, and now it's my 8th Cusco all of a sudden, and 7th Iditarod in March, and yeah, it's a lot has happened in the last 7 or 8 years. Oh, just everything I've learned from racing, you know, quite a few thousand miles the last so many years, and just learning more about the whole thing and watching different people do different things, and it's been quite the learning experience. I would say I'm a totally different musher than I was 8 years ago, and hope to keep improving and learning more every year. And new dogs, new dog team. This team is almost entirely bred and raised here. The team I started with was kind of pieced together from here and there and everywhere. So yeah, a lot has changed in the last 7, 8 years, but this race is still the same, and it's fun to be back again. Probably the same person, but a different, hopefully better dog musher. 8 years later, that's kind of the whole idea, is you want to learn as much as you can every year. So throughout this whole process of starting racing, and now I went from, you know, a few years fresh out of high school and not really certain what I was going to do with my life, and now there's a lot more structure to what's going on, and have a family and a son and a job, that a company I've been with for years now, and so yeah, life has changed. I think even minus the dog mushing, that's just how everybody's life goes. You grow and mature, and things change, and you take on new responsibilities and different responsibilities, and become more of an adult in that whole process. Having a family and having a kid changes the way you changes the amount of time you can devote to your team and all that stuff. I mean, you try to find a balance with being able to do everything correctly and give the dogs the amount of time and energy they need, and also keep the whole family side of things in check, and then the work side of things too in the summer. It's a lot to balance all of it, but it's nothing that almost all of my competition is dealing with also. I'd like to say it all revolves around the family, but there's a pretty even balance between the two. You still have to devote plenty of time to the dog program to be successful and be competitive. So it's a careful juggle between everything. Not so much, not too much extra pressure. I felt a lot of pressure last year to do well, and I think maybe even less pressure this year, even though I still want to do well. That little extra bit of anxiety maybe is gone now, but I still want to do well, and we've still prepared, you know, put a lot of time and energy into preparation for this. So I think the biggest difference this year over last year is I have a better understanding of my team, and it's basically the same team as last year, and last year was their first, they were mostly 3-year-olds. Last year was their first year that I thought they could compete to win. And I didn't know exactly what they were capable of going into that race, and this year I have a better idea now after that Cusco and then an Iditarod last year. So I have a better understanding of what that team can do and what they're capable of, and hopefully I can use that. Yeah, it's just the years, you know, an extra year now I've spent with the dogs and learning about them, and they've learned a lot the last year. In the year before that, it's a learning process for everybody, especially with young dogs and building a new team, and they have to go out and experience those races and all that competitiveness to become better dogs. And so now they're 4, and now they've kind of been around the block a little bit, and they're still young and still have more learning to do, but they've got a really competitive year under their belt last year, and I think can only help them this year. Part of the reason I do Iditarod is because once you're trained up for this race, you're ready for Iditarod pretty much. So I am, you know, I really want to do well in Iditarod, but this one I want to do well in also. It's got a different feel being the hometown race and growing up here and watching it for years. This is a different animal, this race. It's fast. I mean, I don't know if anybody starts the first 300 miles of the Iditarod off like we run this race, with such little rest and high speed and, you know, wind or water or whatever you get. So it's a whole different deal. Haven't run any other races quite like this one. It's such a short race that I think lack of sleep for the musher isn't a big concern. You're doing long runs on short rest. It's the minimal amount of mandatory rest. I don't think there's any 300-mile race with less or equal mandatory rest than this. So you're combining long runs at high speed with short rest, and that's a combination that makes for a really difficult race. And you have to have all three of those things work out for you and maintain good speed throughout the race on short rest. It's hard to do. This one you can't really afford to let issues work their way out. You got to have all your ducks really have to be in a row starting this race. And I mean, I personally like to take it a little easy going to Calskag, but you know, that's all setting yourself up for later in the race. And if you have one bad run on this race, you're probably not going to win. You have to have everything's got to go smoothly. There's too much competition, too many guys that are going to have good runs, and you can't make many mistakes in this one if you want to win. It's like it always is. It's the who's who. It's, you know, Jeff, who's won 9 times, I believe, and Roan, who's been real successful the last 4 or 5 years, and Martin, and it's all the greats. Lance, you know, Brent's here is having a couple of really good years, and then some other local talent that's really good too. So it's going to be hard to win. The training's been okay. I wouldn't label it a perfect year for training wise, but we've got a similar amount of miles on the dogs as we did last year. The big difference is last year I trained in Nenana for a good month and a half before the race. This year I've pretty much been here all year, with the exception of going up to Fairbanks for a week before, just last week. So similar type of runs, similar miles, but totally different locations. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Yeah, it looks like the weather's, we're not going to have any warm, looks like. It looks like it'll be maybe around 0 ambient temperatures with some wind, which should put it, you know, around 10, 20 below wind chill, and a very fast, hard, icy trail with, I think, a little better down here and then a little worse up there, just as far as traction for the dogs' feet goes. I think they'll have a little better footing down here, and then once we get up closer to Aniak, it sounds like a little more polished glare ice on the river. But I don't think there's almost no section of the trail that has any real snow. Bogus might have a little bit of snow, but we lost pretty much all of it there around Christmas time. You know, last year I didn't train here, and that was our first win, and so I don't know, you know, I mean, there's been way more guys that have come from out of town and won the race than guys from around here, so I don't know, maybe a little bit, but I don't think it's enough of an advantage to change the outcome of the race.
Sure.
I think the strongest dog team is going to win there the last 50 miles.